So non-spoiler review for The Flash. I saw it and it was really built up, I think. Um and I don't think it lived up to kind of the big built upness that people were talking. I think the built upness came out of some interesting cameos that we get in this movie. So those were really fun to see. Um the
Not uncanny valley and horrible and kind of offensive
I
in a way
mean,
of milking dead people.
I think they
Some people
worked.
have said that. That's all I'm saying that for.
Yes.
Some people have come out and said that it felt grotesque.
I think they work, but because he does go on to defend the CGI in the film when people have criticized it, that when uh Barry is in kind of this time bubble that he's created, the CGI does look a little gummy and weird and like cuts, video game cutscene-ish. And it's meant to look like that because it's not reality. It's like the layers of other realities. It's the layers of what's happening in his mind and layers of time kind of melding together. So it's not supposed to completely look natural. So I'm like, okay, I'll give him that.
Is that
So
just a very clever excuse?
I mean, I could believe that if that was the only time the CGI looked weird, but it's like throughout the whole movie. So,
Oh,
yes, it does look like it looks clearly like the people that it's supposed to look like, but it does look like PS3 kind of level cutscene. Yes, like level
dear.
animation of the characters that we're getting to see. So it was fun, a fun idea to have some of these cameos in here. Um,
Not saying who because non-spoiler.
yes, I wouldn't. I'm not gonna. I'll leave that to you to see for yourself. But yeah, I think that was a fun element. I did like the relationship between the two Barrys. I think there was a good play off of each other because the Barry that we do end up meeting from the past is like 18, so he's an 18-year-old excitable, hyper unfocused version of the character, having to, be wrangled by the more mature version of the character. And even that version of the character we
Seems
know to not be incredibly
strange.
mature. So our version of Barry has to kind of mature himself even more in order to wrangle this very young version of himself. So that
I
dynamic.
think Ezra Miller should look at this character and put it onto their own life.
Yes, yes, definitely. There were a lot of moments in this film where I was feeling some things about yeah, this is a
Is it
weird
is it is
parallel
it a
of things.
case of how can you not see the parallels with your own life?
There were a few moments like that actually, where things were happening and I'm like, this feels like
That's weird. That's
things that kind of relate to
weird.
the
That's
outside. But
strange.
yes. So I mean, but the dynamic between the two Barrys, this already kind of Barry that's trying to be mature, having to step up to wrangle this very younger, unfocused version of himself, was a fun dynamic. Really emotional scenes, I think, were well played with him trying to, having that focus of wanting to save his mother. A really well crafted story in terms of why he goes back. How it opened with it opens with kind of a fun set piece as well, and that's where we get our Ben Affleck Batman in there.
Okay.
Um, really keeping it despite earlier iterations kind of being dead in the water of this universe, still connecting it to that and feeling like it relates. So I was worried that they were going to try to find some weird way to cut that tie, like sever that tie immediately and just try to do its own thing. But no, it's still very much grounded in the Zack Snyder verse that was kind of set up,
Yeah.
which I think
A
is fine.
good send off for the
Yes.
DCEU then as it was called.
Yes. There are some moments in the middle where it does drag a little bit when we are kind of in the um meeting Michael Keaton Batman and then kind of
Okay.
formulating how we're going to defeat Zod, that whole kind of sequence that
Yeah.
happens. That's where things I think drag and slow down a little bit. Michael Keaton was great. It was good to see him again. He feels very much like the character and where he would be at in his older life, especially, at this point, we saw how old Michael Goff was in those movies. So imagine this is a Bruce being on his own without
Yes. Yes. No.
an Alfred to take
No
care of him.
Alfred left.
Yeah, so he does feel very much like a reclusive Bruce Wayne of the one that we knew in 89 and 92, and where he would be without an Alfred living on his own. I think there was a lot of, I recently rewatched those films before going to see The Flash. So, from what I could tell, there was at least a little bit of attention paid to making rooms and even the Batcave elements look very similar to what was in those movies, which
Okay.
I thought was kind of a cool little thing. Um, uh, uh, Kara, our Supergirl, she was really great, but I think she was a bit underutilized. I would have loved to see more of her.
That's a
But in the scenes
shame.
that she was in, she was great. So overall, a well-crafted story. I think it does drag a little bit uh once we are kind of getting to the Zod stuff. It kind of circles back to what our villain ends up being pretty well. And the time travel stuff I think works really well also. And yeah, I had fun with it. The only thing that was just really sloppy and distracting really was the CGI. It was very sloppy. Like,
Which is
it,
such a shame.
think the baby from Ally McBeal, like levels of bad in some of these scenes. Yeah.
It makes you wonder how, though.
Yes.
It
And
makes
like
you wonder how after
think back.
so long of a production.
Yes, like there's no excuse. You were in post-production for so long. There was plenty of time and I'm sure plenty of money to go back and really clean these things up. Like we can go back to what, 1946 with a Betty Davis movie, A Stolen Life, where she's playing twins
Yeah.
and she's playing in a room against herself at the same time. The Parent Trap movies, both of them when they came out, seamless to
Yeah.
one actress playing the same person together and it looking seamless and clean and just
You
doing
get the
stand-in type of stuff. Um,
the Dark Mirror with Olivia de Havilland. I think that's 1948.
yes, and
Does the
and
same thing.
really good practical effects and camera trickery and things like that that worked so well. But this movie tries to have the 2 berries really interact more, and it looks good in a lot of scenes, but then other ones, you can tell there's like a gummy berry face on somebody else, and it just you can tell immediately. So it just doesn't look right, and I'm like, "Why not just do practical things where you can or try to clean this up?" Because what makes the CGI not look as smooth is because they don't worry about pores and texture. It's all very smooth, and that's why it looks so much like
Oh.
early gummy CGI, especially in the movement and the action. It looks very kind of smooth and gummy because there's no pores, there's no texture really, like we've seen in really advanced CGI films. So I just don't get there's no excuse for them to not have been able to have the time or even the money to go back and especially if you are banking on this film, you're already saying that, despite all the shit with Ezra Miller, we're still going to release this movie because we are trust in how good it is. Then why not put your money where your mouth is and put that money into cleaning it up? Because I think if the CGI had looked as clean as it could have looked, I think it would have not been, you know, not have had as much criticism as I think it's getting, because I think that's the biggest thing for most people is the CGI.
Yeah, because it's not as though that level of CG is the norm anymore. You
Yeah,
know, there's phenomenal CG in a good deal of major blockbuster movies
yeah,
today. There's some still has some fairly dodgy CG, some fairly iffy CG, as I would like to say.
yeah,
Um, Clearly, this is one of them.
but
But for something like this, it shouldn't be everybody talking about the fact that it's visually strange to look at. It's uncanny sometimes visually.
Yeah.
Um, and I always think, look, Zack Snyder was a CG monster, wasn't he? Really,
Yeah.
he loves CG. He loves over stylizing things and
Yeah.
making
He's all
things
about the visuals, yeah.
look, the super slow mo and all this kind of stuff. But I always think that looked good.
Yes, it looked really smooth, it looked realistic. Um,
Like,
he always
it
made
was
a point.
heavy. It was clearly heavily CG,
Yeah.
but it was good looking. It was the same kind of level that you got in the big two Avengers movies, your Infinity War and Endgame. It's the
Yeah.
same level that I suppose it's not quite this level because this movie was a particularly unique one, but Avatar: Way of Water, it's that same idea of you're fully aware that it's all CG, but it still looks
Looks
wonderful.
incredible because there's a focus on pores and texture and coloring and tones and all of these different things, but
That's what I
everything here
always
just
thought with
looked so.
Snyder's anyway.
Yes, everything in this just looked so smooth and flat, and you could totally tell, and, like, it felt like there were things that could have been done, like I talk about, the one actor playing 2 characters in the same scene. Things
Yeah,
that could have been done practically, things that like, even fight sequences that could have been done with stunt people, because like, the MCU has an insane amount of stunt things that they do with wire works and stunt doubles and all of these things, and it looks really real, or doing, like, bird's eye view shots, and I'm thinking about, like, the, Black Widow fight scene in the hallway and stuff like that
yeah,
in Iron Man 2. Um, and do your fight scenes in dynamic shots if you don't want to like worry about showing people's faces. Um, especially with the Batman stuff because he's one who's doing hand-to-hand fight
yeah.
stuff. He's not doing anything super crazy like Supergirl
I s
or you know.
Well, I suppose in a way, you have got to heavily rely on CG fighting
Yeah.
for someone like the Flash because he's sprinting at the speed of light everywhere.
Yes, but think of something like Sherlock Holmes, those slow-mo fight scenes with Robert Downey Jr. punching somebody and we're seeing the slow-mo. They could have
Yeah.
worked with his slow-mo and shown those things with a
And
very
then I
smooth kind
suppose
of effect.
you also think of those Evan Peters Quicksilver scenes in the X-Men movies that were
Yes.
really quite good.
Yes, and they did a lot of and that is a heavily CGI scene, but they did a lot
Yeah,
of practical things as well, like, they had people just those items that were floating tied to strings and stuff like that. Um, so there was some combination of the 2, but it felt like it was just so reliant on the CGI. So, like, even scenes of Batman fighting felt a bit gummy movement, like he wasn't really there or there wasn't really a stuntman in the suit doing these actions. So even stuff like that just felt like, come on, like use stunt people, use wire work, do something to make this feel grounded and real, like it's existing, and I'm not just watching this video game cutscene. So there were moments where I felt like practical stuff could have been used, and it felt like it was just too reliant on the CGI. So that was probably the biggest issue for me that pulled me out of the movie. But story wise, I think the story was pretty well focused, pretty well done, aside from some slower moments. Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton, great. I think Ben Affleck was good as well. I think Ezra Miller did a good job in terms of having to play off of themselves and having to play the emotion of Barry losing his mother and all of that, and wanting to save his father. He had a lot of scenes and kind of this developing relationship with Iris West, so that brought in some fun comedic elements, and even the stuff with Barry brought in a lot of fun comedic, moments as well. I thought the idea of the cameos were fun, and I felt like if you're going to kinda go for that, go all the way with it. Um, and also, yeah, just make the CGI better 'cause, I can it didn't bother me as much because it was in that kind of whole time bubble that, was
yeah.
described as things not meaning to look super clean. It's meant to be this melding of things. Um, but I get what people would say about it looking kind of uncanny valley-ish. But I had fun kind of seeing the different things that kind of were popping up there. So overall, I enjoyed the film. There is a post-credit scene, so stay for that.
Naturally.
Um, and yeah, overall enjoyed it. I think it was built up a little too much. I think it's because of all the little fun things that are sprinkled throughout it is what made people kind of have this great kind of idea on it.
So it
I
is
would
not the greatest DC movie of all time.
no, I think it's maybe up there for me. It might crack my
Okay.
top 5 of the DCEU films, but
Oh, no, I mean,
definitely
like, DC
oh,
all
DC of
time
all
because people were
time?
saying DC all time, it was
I
best
wouldn't
run.
say DC all time, no. Um,
Not
of
close, really.
I mean, it's in the conversation, but I don't think it's beating
Okay.
a lot of things. So, um, yeah, I enjoyed The Flash. I think it's a fun movie. I think it's a fun idea. I think it's a good story. I think the performances are good. But the CGI lets it down. It's a little too long and lulls in parts. Um, but some good character dynamics, and some fun little Easter eggs in there. So
Okay. Okay, well, there we go.